What's up, everybody? Welcome into another YouTube live show. I am John Kurtz. We got a lot tonight. We got a great article to talk about from The Athletic with some incredible detail in the Big 12's pursuit of the four corner schools of the Pac-12 and just some background on Brett Yormark that is very, very interesting. I know it feels like it has been now a while since all of that happened, but this is a pretty good retrospective on how everything went down and something that I think we all felt at the time was going to come out eventually. It was going to be a matter of who got it and when. And now some time has passed. We got it. Very interesting stuff from The Athletic. Believe that Max Olson is who should get the bulk of the credit on that. But really good stuff. We're going to break it all down because some of this it confirms some of the things that we thought. I would say it challenges a couple of the things that we thought. And it provided, in at least one case, a hilarious bit of irony to the Pac-12 once again, as if there have not been enough hilarious bits of irony for the Pac-12 and how all of this played out. So there is that. Obviously, we can talk some Week 5 Big 12 football. The docket, Kansas and Texas coming up at 2:30 on Saturday, Houston at Texas Tech, Baylor at UCF, Iowa State, Oklahoma, West Virginia, TCU, and then, of course, on Friday, which is going to be a good day for college football, by the way, Cincinnati and BYU are playing in a little bit of Big 12 After Dark, 9:15 on ESPN, some Big 12 After Dark action there. You've also got to believe Utah and Oregon State are playing on Friday. So Friday should be an awesome little day of college football. Beyond that, the college football playoff. We had meetings. We have a report about where things are leaning for the next 2 years, which is important, what the format is going to be. When I say leaning toward a format, which it sounds like now that is headed toward the direction of 5+7, essentially eliminating one of those automatic conference champion bids with the fact that the Pac-12 is now the Pac-2. So we are headed in that direction, it sounds like, but there's a lot of discussion about this. Mike Oresco, everybody's favorite character, is putting up a little bit of a stink right now about where all of this could be headed, and he seems to want to halt that 5+7 model for the time being, if he can secure some kind of long-term commitment for Group of 5 teams, still being able to be out there and getting into the college football playoff. So there is that too. Pretty big national story. Michigan State job candidates have now started to surface with Mel Tucker being officially fired. He was notified last week by Michigan State that he was going to be fired. Now it's officially happened, and as you might expect, you have some Big 12 candidates for this job. We have seen this happen for many an open job over the last couple of years because there are some really good coaches in the Big 12. One actually turned Michigan State down publicly today in an interview on Big 12 radio, so we can get to all that as well. That's what I've got on my outline today, but you guys know you are always a part of the show as much as you want to be. Getting close to 100 people in the chat here tonight. I will not be able to keep track of everything that is going on. So if you want to be a part of things tonight, if you want your voice to be heard, and you want to support the work that I'm doing here on this channel, you can do both at the same time. Great news for you. You can do both at the same time, and you do that by clicking the $ below the chat box. So you can attach a donation to your question or comment, turns it into a super chat, puts it in a separate category for me, so it guarantees that it gets read, ensures that you make it on the show tonight, ensures that your voice is heard, and you are, again, supporting the work that I'm doing to bring you college football, college basketball, conference realignment content, all from a Big 12 angle here on this channel. That is how you can do so. If you want to support the channel for free, all it takes is one click, nothing more. It is just the like button. Just like the video, simply, that is it. You can also leave a comment in the comment section of the video. That really helps as well. Any of that is much, much, much appreciated. Helps with that good old YouTube algorithm. You guys know about the YouTube algorithm. It helps out there. So I would appreciate each and every one of you who do that. And if you are catching up to this after the fact, you're not watching live, John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo is another easy way to support the channel. I will address a couple of things here. I'm going to do this one. This is not a super chat, but because I wanted to address it, Ron asks, what does my shirt say? Well, this is a shirt about my favorite radio program in the Kansas City area, the Church of Laszlo. Little free publicity for those guys. Great podcast. I just check it out in podcast form. Go search Church of Laszlo. Change your life. That would be my my suggestion there. Houston Cougars Germany checking in. What's up, Houston Cougars Germany? Houston Cougars Germany says, "Hi, John, the soap opera that is college football. It is certainly a soap opera these days, and it is continuing to be a soap opera. I tell you what, reading through a couple of the articles from the college football playoff meeting that was going on today, which turned out to not be any sort of meeting about the actual format. There was a lot of talk about it. Like reporters were asking questions about that, and we got quotes about it. But in terms of what was discussed by everybody in the room, it was not the actual format yet. Man, that is turning into a drama because they need a unanimous vote, and Mike Oresco, representing G5, is not wanting to do that here at the moment. Quite obviously, he would rather see 6 conference champs, because if it's going to be the 6 highest rated conference champs, that would mean an extra spot for his, as opposed to a 5+7 model for the next 2 years. We did have a Dennis Dodd article this week too, honestly, that was talking about leadership at Washington State and Oregon State and what they think could be major disruptors for college football, and just talking about all these different scenarios of how things could go. The sports business, I believe it was Sports Business Journal, I hope I don't have that wrong, somebody reported this week that Fox and ESPN at some point could just pull the top 40 programs and like work with the NFL to basically buy out the top 40 college football programs. Like there are a lot of wild things being speculated about as far as where all this is going to go. Houston Cougars Germany. So you are correct. You are correct. It is definitely a soap opera. And the other thing I would add to that is it probably has more of that feel this year because of Coach Prime and what that has turned college football into, which I think in many ways is for the better. It's pulling in a lot more casual fans or people who would not otherwise be following college football in depth. So that part is good, but there's a lot of baggage that comes along with that, namely just some of the intense, crazy fighting I was seeing after the Oregon game. Wild narratives on both sides of the Coach Prime thing there. But it's turning, clearly, college football into more of an entertainment sort of product. It feels more like a reality show. And with the environment of how things are going from an ESPN and Fox standpoint, they're kind of cherry picking the best brands and stuff. All of it feels very, very made for TV right now, as opposed to just, a game that we love. A game that we love. It is going that route, whether you like it or not. Matthew, what's up, Matthew? Matthew, I appreciate it. Matthew says Kelsey Swift sideshow is another soap opera. Yeah, it sure is, man. I can tell you, living in Kansas City, it has been wild. But there's not a single soul in this city who has not been talking about Taylor Swift for the last 3 days. I mean, my day job, it's been all over the place, inundated with it. Even some of the work things I'm doing, it is crazy. It's completely taken over this city. So if you feel like it and you're not living in Kansas City, just imagine living in Kansas City right now. It is pretty wild. But much as I would love to chat about that, we are not here to chat about Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce, although Travis Kelce is a Big 12 alum. So, I guess there is that. Like, there is a Big 12 tie-in there since he stand up. We've got that tie-in. But I want to talk to you about this piece in The Athletic, man. It's really good. It's just very well done. I wouldn't say there's like a bombshell in here necessarily, but there are some pretty good details that pertain to a lot of the stuff that was talked about. And it starts right with the moment when things turned. The moment when things turned on that Friday morning, Thursday night into Friday morning, when it looked like the Pac-12 was going to stay together and then fell apart. So here's where it starts. It says Mack Rhodes, Baylor's athletic director, Mack Rhodes was pacing in his vacation home in New Mexico, starting to seriously fear the deal was falling apart. Brett Yormark was back home in New York on an endless run of phone calls. It wasn't looking good. Arizona was supposed to be across the finish line. The school had already requested and was approved for Big 12 membership. Yormark, the Big 12 commissioner, awaited final verbal confirmation late on the night of August 3rd. Arizona President Bobby Robbins went into a Board of Regents meeting to get their blessing, anticipating that the board would urge Arizona State to make a move. But Arizona State President Michael Crow, in a fervent effort to preserve the Pac-12, put up a good fight. Now Arizona's plans were in doubt. Yormark couldn't sleep that night. All right, how about that detail? Brett Yormark could not sleep that night when all of a sudden he started to feel bad about Arizona. And it later on in the story mentions he started feeling bad when he did not get like a text about how things went. He did not get a call about how things went in that Board of Regents meeting. It was just silence from Arizona. So that was when he was starting to have his doubts about what happened. Yormark couldn't sleep that night. He kept playing it all out in his head, pondering all the possible scenarios and what it would take to bring the deal back to life. But 7 a.m. Pacific, Rhodes learned the Big Ten reached an agreement with Oregon. They were going. Then he got a call from his contact at Utah. Their leadership wanted to set up a meeting. And while they were still on the line, Arizona called. And suddenly they were ready to commit. So things happened very fast. That is in line with a lot of the reporting. And a part of the reason I actually left that in at the beginning of the story is because I know that there has been some back and forth about, and like Jason Scheer was pretty adamant Arizona still likely would have gone without Arizona State had Arizona State really held things up and kept that Pac-12 deal in place. I would say that this reporting seems to lean more on the other side, like it really was about to fall apart. And later on in the article, it did say like Michael Crow went into that meeting on Friday or was prepared to go into that meeting on Friday morning, despite his reservations sticking with the Pac-12. So it does appear that the Oregon-Washington Big Ten domino really was it, according to this Athletic story. But they referenced the Athletic that they spoke with more than a dozen presidents, athletic directors, and industry experts to get this whole inside story. So one thing that I love here, they go back to the commissioner search when the Big 12 is trying to find Brett Yormark, right? This is almost like an oral history going back to the beginning of hiring Brett Yormark. And it says, when the Big 12 neared the end of its commissioner search in the summer of 2022, finalists were asked to bring something to their in-person interview. A big idea, something original, innovative, achievable. And Baylor president Linda Livingstone says Brett couldn't just bring one idea, he had 10. And that should not surprise anybody, right? With what we've seen from Yormark now with Rucker Park, Big 12 Mexico, all these different ideas, even down to the food, right? The food stuff at the Big 12 tournament, those food items. He's had a lot of ideas. Livingstone remembers talking through a list of more than 20 candidates early in the search. When Brett Yormark got brought up, he acknowledged the 55-year-old Rock Nation COO was an outside-the-box option, but impressive enough to merit a long look. And Texas Tech president Lawrence Chovanec, who had led the three-person search committee, said the Big 12 board labeled Yormark as the high-risk, high-reward finalist, but that's what they needed. Again, when I talk about confirming things, we've long said this. Like Brett Yormark was clearly exactly what the league needed, and I give the league a lot of credit for being humble enough to admit that that's what they needed and not too scared to go that route, because had they not, I just shudder to think of where this league would be right now if it were more the traditional guy who had been an athletic director before. It's not the way it went. Not the way it went. So now we talk about Yormark's first day on the job. Yormark's first official day on the job as successor to longtime Commissioner Bob Bowlesby was August 1st. He declared the Big 12 was open for business. And, quote, when we started talking about membership, Mac Rhodes said it was always those four. Zeroed in on the four corner schools right away. Everything we thought behind the scenes of the Big 12 was really thinking four corners, going after four corners. Yes, we have some confirmation now from those that were in the trenches. That is what happened. They were bound and determined to go that route. Yormark and his presidents and ADs pushed them, the four corner schools, to consider departing their destabilized league. So this is right after USC and UCLA leave, which happened, I forgot about this, a day after Brett Yormark was hired. Yormark and his presidents and ADs pushed those four corner schools to consider departing their destabilized league, but they weren't ready. The Pac-12 had just begun talking with ESPN and Fox, and Kliavkoff fought back, accusing the Big 12 of lobbing grenades to destroy his league. And apparently the night before that, according to this story, the night before the grenades comment, Brett Yormark had texted George Kliavkoff and reminded him, it's not personal, it's business. So I do like the idea of that. Brett Yormark just trying to be, and this is kind of back to things he has said throughout this process. He always believed in being open and honest, not doing anything in the shroud of secrecy. So he texts George Kliavkoff and says, like, hey, man, we all kind of know the deal here. We know what's going on. It's not personal, it's business. And then the next day, George Kliavkoff's reaction was to turn around at the podium and basically lash out, accuse the Big 12 of lobbing grenades and trying to blow up and destabilize the conference. I would just again say, and this is a dead horse, this is a beaten down narrative by this point in time, but it just underscores to me why I like rolling with Yormark, man. Calm, confident, calculated. George Kliavkoff, not so calm, not so calculated, and not nearly as confident. Like, I think some insecurity showing with that he the next day went out and made those comments that he did. And I guess, look, understandable to have insecurity because we see what happened to his league. It turned into the Power 2, and now he's hiding away in Montana in the midst of a lawsuit where he's being sued by members left in his own league. I also like this from Brett Yormark in the article. When it comes to the Four Corner schools, it says Yormark wasn't going to beg. He needed schools that wanted to be aligned with the Big 12 and weren't just settling if the Pac-12 got a bad deal. Quote, "I want someone to run to us," Yormark said. He sat down with Robbins at the men's Final Four in Houston. So that's Bobby Robbins from Arizona. Sat down with Robbins at the men's Final Four in Houston and told him, frankly, "I'm not going to be your life preserver." So Brett Yormark very much stuck his neck out and said, look, you better come because you're on board with this vision. You're not coming here tail tucked between your legs begrudgingly, although Arizona State essentially did. I think the others were in a bit of a different context. But there's a story later on about how exactly Arizona State President Michael Crow actually convinced Brett Yormark that he would be good to go in the new league. By early April, and this syncs up with what reporting had been at the time, by early April, Brett Yormark believed he could get Colorado. The Pac-12 pushed back its deal timeline to late spring or early summer. The Big 12 commissioner leaned on intel from his deep Rolodex of TV contacts. They were all telling him that Kliavkoff Cobb had misplayed his hand. He knew the Pac-12 was in trouble. I mean, I just love all of this. You think back to the reporting, you think back to the Pac-12 propaganda machine, everything that they were churning out at that point. It's fine. Deals come in, lay up to beat the Big 12 deal. And what did I say? I said, look, Brett Yormark clearly, he's got a lot of contacts. They helped him out getting the TV deal early. He got a little nudge to get in front of the Pac-12 in line there, which was an immensely valuable thing to have happen. And now he's using those contacts again here in this context where they're saying, hey, man, George Kliavkoff's in a rough spot. George Kliavkoff is in a rough spot. You need to go capitalize right now. And that's why he starts feeling confident that he can actually go out and get Colorado. Colorado remained the consensus priority, according to the article. Yormark had already met again with Colorado's leaders in Chicago and told the board he was having productive talks. The timeline on when they might jump was unclear, but Yormark believed they were becoming fed up with the Pac-12 and might not wait for a TV deal. If you're curious about how far down the road the Big 12 got with other schools here, schools that were not in the Power 5, I think this is a pretty valuable nugget from the story. It says the Big 12 briefly discussed Memphis. So, I guess all that. Remember the consternation at one point in time there about Memphis and whether or not Yormark had actually gone down there for a visit, and there were conflicting reports and people were really fighting about that. Well, here you go. Here's your line, Memphis. The Big 12 briefly discussed Memphis. They also briefly discussed San Diego State and other expansion candidates, but says San Diego State strongly preferred joining the Pac-12 and viewed the Big 12 as a backup plan. Yormark didn't appreciate that. He did meet with Gonzaga, but those talks never got serious. I mean, I like that. Okay, San Diego State, you're going to treat us as the backup plan here when you're not in the Power 5 league right now. That's not going to be a match. Again, syncs up with what a lot of the reporting was at that time. And in some ways that got skewed in some formats. That got skewed to the Big 12 couldn't even get San Diego State here. But clearly it seemed to me to be just sort of a mutual hey, we prefer the Pac-12, which is understandable if you're San Diego State. And meanwhile, Brett Yormark is saying we prefer somebody who really wants to be here. And we're trying to stand up for ourselves and not be a conference that's getting walked all over. So I like that. I like that from Brett Yormark. How far did it get with UConn? Everybody wondering about UConn here. How far did it get? Yormark traveled to Stores for a campus visit after the Huskies men's basketball national title and later had a second meeting with their leadership in New York. The commissioner saw something his peers did not, a proven brand in men's and women's basketball that gets the league into New York City and the East Coast. He believed, now this part is funny and doesn't look great. He believed Jim Mora has the football program heading in the right direction, but it points out in parentheses, Jim Mora is currently 0-4 this year at UConn, and he trusted that over time UConn would add value. Well, thankfully we never had to actually go down that road. I think that's probably a good thing. I don't know that was a great marriage on either side. I'm not sure that UConn was super stoked about that. So when Yormark is talking about hey, I want people in here because they're all in with this, I don't know. I just never sensed that was going to be a thing that either side would be all in on. There were moments when the Big 12 and Pac-12 could have worked together. Okay, a little bit more here. Bob Bowlesby flew to Montana in 2021 to visit Kliavkoff and discuss a partnership. Wouldn't you love to be a fly on the wall for that meeting? Like what that was like in 2021, Bob Bowlesby in Montana, like some picture in like Yellowstone scene with George Kliavkov discussing how their leagues could actually work together. Similar conversations between Yormark and Kliavkov last summer, so summer 22, didn't go far, and both sides disagree on who initiated them. Yeah, that's an understatement. One of the moments that I remember Pac-12 propaganda machine being like as angry as they have been was when that report came out that it was the Big 12 that said thanks but no thanks to a merger with the Pac-12. That was not taken kindly in Pac-12 country at all. Not taken kindly. But expansion moves made by the SEC and Big Ten and the growing revenue gap between them and every other conference put the Big 12 and Pac-12 in the uncomfortable position of eat or be eaten. And here's a quote from Mac Rhodes that is perfectly accurate, perfectly summed up. He said, I kind of looked at it and framed it as, man, we have no choice. Right now, if you're not trying to be aggressive, you get left behind. And that is 1,000% true. I have said that approximately 2,000 times on this channel, I believe, since the beginning of it. Yormark was still feeling bullish about Colorado at Big 12 Media Days in July, but privately, how about this? Privately, Brett Yormark was starting to concede the four corners scenario might not happen. Maybe he dreamt a little too big early in his tenure. Yormark's still feeling bullish about Colorado at Big 12 Media Days in July, but privately was starting to already concede the four corner scenario. I feel like that's kind of where I was at that time. It was like, I don't know. Still, I kept going like 30-70, 40-60. Didn't feel like the four corners thing was actually going to come through and happen, but there was so much Colorado smoke that it felt like something was probably going to happen there and that you could pry them loose. In August, as far as Colorado goes, Brett Yormark finally visited campus. So he gets to Boulder and he instantly hit it off with Coach Prime over lunch. Now that is a lunch I would love to listen into. Brett Yormark and Deion Sanders, man, two guys that operate, I think, really in very much the same way. Like, hey, we want to change the status quo. We want to shake it up. And that's what the article points out. What the new head coach is doing for Colorado is precisely what Yormark envisions for the Big 12, modernizing the brand to make it younger, more creative, and more culturally relevant. Next up for the Big 12, Arizona. So once they feel like they're in a good spot with Colorado, obviously moved on to Arizona. A lot of this stuff confirming things that we already thought. And I promise we are getting towards the end here. I know this has been a lot to digest, but I hate like reading an article this long, but when it is this compelling and taking us through so much of what happened and what we discussed on this channel here for literally months, I find it a pretty useful exercise. So in the summer of 21, I love this part. In the summer of 21, the Pac-12 could have easily swiped 4 Big 12 schools. You ready, Big 12 fans? Here is who the expansion committee of the Pac-12 looked into. 4 schools from the Big 12. You've got Baylor. You've got Oklahoma State, you've got TCU, and you've got Texas Tech. At the time, had the Pac-12 made an offer, sources at those schools say they absolutely would have accepted that lifeline. Now, there was like the Mac Engel angle, former Star Telegram angle on this. I believe for a minute there was like, hey, TCU and Houston were actually close to going to the Pac-12 at one point in time. That list obviously does not include Houston, but I feel like that it's kind of thinking along the same lines because it's just very Texas heavy. It's Oklahoma State and then 3 Texas schools, and clearly the Pac-12 valued getting into Texas with their flirtation with SMU at the end of the Pac-12 actually existing as a conference that had more than 2 members. So those were the 4, and they would have accepted the offer, which I don't think anybody doubts that. I mean, at that time in summer of 21. I think they absolutely would have accepted that offer, but it never came close to happening. The article is quick to point that out. Pac-12 CEO group passed on expansion, preferring an alliance with the ACC and the Big Ten. Boy, pour one out for the alliance. Rest in peace. Rest in peace to the alliance, as always. Now, Bobby Robbins from Arizona, your university president in Arizona, he wishes that the Pac-12 would have taken all 8 remaining Big 12 schools and formed the Pac-20, but he found few supporters for that concept. He even suggested the ACC, Big 12, and Pac-12 all merge together. Bobby Robbins, our guy Bobby Robbins, wanted the alliance, but he wanted the alliance to be with the Big 12. He wanted Big 12, Pac-12, ACC as the alliance. And frankly, that kind of makes a lot more sense with the landscape right now, how things are, because that would have been, your Power 2 and then the next 3. And so it would make sense that the next 3 would want to band together, do whatever they can to kind of fight the power in that scenario. But instead, that as we know, is not how it worked out. But this part. So interestingly, the efforts by Big 12 presidents, chancellors, and athletic directors to try to earn an invite. So all of these guys that are trying to earn an invite at that point to the Pac-12, scrap, fight, and claw their way to a life raft in 21 after Oklahoma and Texas leave to the Pac-12. Those relationships helped them out when the tables were turned and they then needed to court the four corner schools. It says, now the tables had turned. Yormark's board and ADs were invaluable in these recruitments. So everybody who had tried to scramble and get out to the Pac-12, and the Pac-12 said, no, thanks, but no thanks. We don't need you. Take care. Don't come back. Stop knocking on the door. Those schools then already had relationships with the athletic directors that they needed to talk to about coming back over to the Big 12 when all of a sudden George Kliavkoff had screwed the pooch a year and a half later, 2 years later. Irony, just hilarious senses of irony throughout this entire process, basically at every turn for the Pac-12. So that was really legitimately probably my favorite nugget that we got out of what it is that we see from this article. And again, something we probably could have discerned for ourselves and figured out if you really walked it through, but to have it confirmed with reporting like this, I think is extra valuable and just gives you more credibility to things that we would have thought and said at the time. So now we come back to, again, the Friday deal. Bobby Robbins went into Friday ready to accept the Apple deal despite his reservations. Yormark didn't get a call about how the board meeting went, which wasn't a good sign. Yormark says, I thought, okay, we might be losing this. Big 12 leadership would see how the Pac-12 meeting played out, knowing they might need to regroup and restart the UConn discussion. But at around 6:55 a.m. Pacific time, Robbins said he received a call from Oregon's president, and the Ducks were Big Ten bound. And at that point, it was pretty much over. Last thing here, last but not least, Arizona State. Good old Arizona State. The lovely leadership that the Sun Devils have with their president and athletic director. Arizona State had always been the least engaged of the four. Crow and AD Ray Anderson were adamant about staying in the Pac-12 and did not express interest in the months leading up to Friday morning. Crow genuinely liked the Apple offer. Yeah, we know that. He was still gushing about it like a week after his school was Big 12 bound. Crow genuinely liked the Apple offer. After doing all he could to preserve his league, he now needed to smooth things over with Yormark. He and the commissioner had a 10:30 a.m. Pacific Zoom meeting that convinced Yormark they could move forward together. So thinking like 12:30 Central Time that day, he gets on the horn with good old Michael Crow, and Yormark says this, quote, he told me, Brett, you can't penalize me for being loyal to the Pac-12 because as loyal as I was to the Pac-12, I'm going to be that loyal to you. That really resonated with me. It was heartfelt. I suppose I'll have to take Brett Yormark at his word for that. Just everything I've seen from Michael Crow and how he was speaking and behaving after that move became official doesn't lend itself toward me thinking that's a really heartfelt thing for him to say at that point in time. But, fair enough, I suppose. He did have loyalty to the Pac-12. There's no doubt about that. I just seemed like that was such a hard thing for him to move on from that it is hard for me to buy that he's totally in this mode of like, it's very genuine. I will be this loyal to the Big 12. But Brett Yormark was steadfast in there saying, I want people that are totally on board here. And he felt he was on board enough. I don't know. There may be an element to that that's like, hey, it was the fourth one. It's logical to add them. You're bringing Arizona. You probably just need to bring along Arizona State too, regardless of what this old guy, Michael Crow, who's pretty out of touch when it comes to athletics, is saying. So those are the details that we got from this story. This obviously is a little bit more out of place now than it would have been had it come out a month ago, a month and a half ago, but still very interesting, even though we are sitting here in the thick of the actual football season. If you guys want to be a part of the show tonight, you know how to do it. Click the $ below the chat box to make your chat a super chat. That ensures that I see it. We've got almost 300 people in the chat here. I cannot keep up with everything that's going on there. So if you want to be a part of the show, click that $ below the chat box, make it a super chat. It will pin it for me, put it in a separate column. It will guarantee that you get on the show. Also, like the video if you can. I would much appreciate that. Totally free way to support the channel. And leave a comment in the comment section of the video before, during, or after. Whether you love me or hate me, agree, disagree, all of that is great. Helps with the YouTube algorithm. And John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo is a way that you can support the channel if you are not watching live. Admiral Snack Bar is next up. What's up, Admiral Snack Bar? Well, I like Notre Dame hot takes. Admiral Snack Bar says, hot take, Notre Dame is the most overrated program in the last 30 years. No New Year's Six BCS bowl wins in that time, and the last natty was in 85. Thoughts? Well, first of all, kicking Notre Dame while they're down, man, took just an absolute gut punch of a loss last week. I'm not sure that it gets more gut-wrenching and excruciating than the loss that the Fighting Irish took last week. Now, I'm not going to be leading the pity parade for them. Certainly, I am no Notre Dame guy. Do not get that confused for a second at all. But, I mean, they're certainly – they've lost some of the luster. I guess my argument would be, I feel like at this point we have come around to, like, Notre Dame being a second-tier program. Like, they're not – that's not a top-tier elite program, which is Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia. I would put, like, LSU in there. I suppose probably Michigan now that they've made the playoff the last couple of years. You've got them like in that upper tier, like Notre Dame's kind of second. I mean, I know they've been in the playoff, but they don't seem like a legitimate national title threat. They don't have quite the high-end talent for that. They have a quarterback this year finally, which I do think helps, but they didn't help much against that Ohio State defense, obviously on Saturday. So I feel like we have caught on to it somewhat, and that's the only reason I hesitate a little bit. But certainly they have a ton of name recognition, and if we're talking about like how much coverage they get nationally versus how much they would actually merit, you might start to have an argument there. But I don't think you have to look any further than this conference itself and look at like Texas. Now, the last 15 have been immensely underperforming for Texas. Before that, it was much better. So your 30-year mark is obviously where you struggle with that, because now we're talking about the entire Mac Brown era. But if we're going back further than that, like pre-Mac Brown, which we're getting to in 30 years, that was also a little bit underwhelming for Texas. So that's an option there. 30 years is just that's a tough time frame. So maybe with that, you've got me. I'm thinking out loud about all of this. But look, I'm no Notre Dame apologist at all. Furthest thing from it. I'm the opposite. Not a fan of the Fighting Irish. I would say it's different than it felt different to me, like even like 10 years ago. It felt a little different to me. Now it feels like we're in this area of such high concentrated talent at the top, and only a couple teams can win it every single year. And Notre Dame is not a team that I think has been like seriously entertained by most as a national championship threat for a while. Even as they continue to be very good, we know where their ceiling is at. And I guess the idea with Marcus Freeman is to lift that ceiling, raise that ceiling. The thought would be that maybe he can have perhaps a little bit more of that than Brian Kelly did there. But I don't know. Book is very much still out on that, especially if he can't figure out how to get 10 guys on the field when he needs to make a goal line stand. That would be a nice start for Marcus Freeman. Joe, what's up, Joe? Appreciate you being here, Joe. Thank you for your support as always. Joe says, Yormark jumping to make a deal after the Big Ten and SEC ahead of the pack was critical because it basically sucked up the rest of the money from ESPN and Fox. It did. Sucked up money, sucked up inventory. Both of those things were very good. There was a blurb about that in the article that I just kind of left out because I don't think there was anything super new in there. But it basically said the same thing you're saying, that was a critical thing. Brett Yormark in the article called it one of the most important things that's happened in the history of the conference. And I would agree, because it literally could have meant the end of the conference had he not locked that up and not secured that. So, yes, that was, of all the things that happened, probably the most crucial thing, because it gave the Big 12 some bargaining power and some legitimacy and made the Pac-12's life much easier. It was like two things at once. One, you're now locked in. You can say, here are our numbers, and here is our future on linear with the two big boys that matter. We've got that inked. We've got that lined up. You don't have to worry about it. Whereas the Pac-12, things became a problem when it was all speculative and you didn't actually have anything tangible there. And it's just very easy to say, hey, this is coming. Hey, it's going to be a layup. Hey, this is great. But you never actually had that tangibly there. Big 12 had it. Big 12 had it. And that was a big deal. That was a big deal, especially when it came to getting Colorado, which was the domino that killed a potential linear deal. for the Pac-12, and then eventually led to everything falling apart. Matthew says Apple space age technology still impressing Michael Crow. Yeah, I think it sounded like a DVR was still really impressing Michael Crow. Can somebody get him a TiVo? We have a TiVo still out there that we could get to Michael Crow. It seems like he would be very, very into that. Maybe be the one guy that would still be on a TiVo in 2023. When did TiVo first start, man? I feel like that was forever ago that was a novelty. The Yates 27. Oh, wow. The Yates 27 says West Virginia looks like a MAC team, worst in the Big 12. I mean, look, the Big 12 has not been great this year, so I don't think that's fair at all to say to West Virginia. I mean, I think Houston looks worse than West Virginia. I think Baylor looks worse than West Virginia. I think Oklahoma State looks worse than West Virginia. I won't say Iowa State since they got the offense rolling against the Cowboys last week. I'll refrain from throwing them into that group, but I don't know, man. I mean, West Virginia's beaten a couple of Power 5 schools, beating Texas Tech and Pitt in back-to-back weeks. I don't think Pitt is anything to write home about at all. And Texas Tech, lost their starting quarterback in Tyler Shuck in that game. And they have had a disappointing start to the season, but I wouldn't totally scoff at that. I don't know. I don't feel like that's fair to the Mountaineers at all. You're going to get West Virginia fans coming back at you. The West Virginia fans that were very upset about being picked last in the Big 12. Gave them a lot of credit on Sunday and Neil Brown for finding a way to figure it out. Again, with a backup quarterback. Speaking of teams playing with a backup quarterback. And, I love the potential there of Nico, but it doesn't seem like he's totally ready to go right now, perhaps a little bit overwhelmed, but they're still finding ways to win. So I don't know. I think West Virginia's got a path here to be a bowl team, which would be potentially job-saving for Neil Brown, maybe. I'm sure there are still a lot of mixed feelings there for West Virginia fans, how exactly they are with Neil Brown. But I'll tastefully disagree. Oh, good God. I see the age 27 sarcasm, brother. Let's go Mountaineers. All right. My bad. Sarcasm meter was turned off there. Well, you got a nice little soliloquy about your Mountaineers, okay? So I guess that worked, the age 27. Maybe that was the plan all along. So you're making fun of everybody who said West Virginia was a MAC team and would finish last in the Big 12. Got it. Yeah, no, West Virginia's got the look of a bowl team to me right now. I think they can figure that out, especially if you get Garrett Green back and healthy playing quarterback. So I'm with it. I am with it. You know what? Let's roll through those other matchups. Cincy at BYU. And this is why I know there's been a lot of discussion about this game because the line has changed like 5 points. I'm seeing it right now. It's Cincy -2. And did I not see it earlier in the week? Was the deal that started at like +3? So what has changed here? What has changed? Cincy or BYU fans, if somebody could enlighten me on what exactly caused that. I mean, that's pretty crazy line movement, and it does seem weird to me. Cincy going on the road in Provo and being a 2-point favorite after the last 2 weeks that they've had, that seems a little much. Seems a little much for me, and it feels like one of those weird lines that I would almost lean into. Like that's a line so weird that I would say, well, Vegas knows something. That's a Vegas knows something spot for me where I would say, all right, well, we gotta push into that and say, I'm going to throw my hands up and be like, look, clearly Vegas is smarter than me. They build the buildings for some reason. And it's not because I know more than they actually do. But I would think that BYU would certainly be the favorite in that game. Now for BYU, I mean, let down last week against Kansas. The same thing. I mean, Cincinnati is coming off of a huge spot where they're at home hosting Oklahoma, their first Big 12 game. You're at home, you're hosting the Sooners, huge deal. And then you go out and lose that game with barely a whimper from your offense. Emory Jones really struggling. I don't know. That's a weird one to me. So I am very intrigued as to how that game is actually going to play out. But really important one for both schools, because if you're Cincinnati and you're talking about starting 2-3 after promising win over Pitt, now all of a sudden you're 2-3 and 0-2 in the Big 12. That's going to be a tough hole to climb out of. And BYU can really start to get rolling and feeling pretty good about itself if you win this game and you're off to a 4-1 start. TCU and Texas Tech, back-to-back games, winnable enough. Difficult game at Texas, but then West Virginia, Iowa State, winnable games. At Oklahoma State, still there at the end of the year, winnable game. So BYU could really get back on track and get some momentum. I think if they pick that up, I would still probably pick BYU if you put a gun to my head, but Vegas seems to know something. Okay. Next on the docket, Kansas and Texas, all 2:30 and then 6 or 7 games in the Big 12 this week. Kansas and Texas. I see that the line has come down a little bit, and that makes sense to Texas minus 16.5. I think Kansas will put up a fight here. I think this will be a good game. And I think College Football World agrees. The fact that it winds up in a 2:30 ABC slot, which it clearly is the best of the Big 12 matchups here on this day. But a lot of people are going to see that. That's going to do a pretty big number. I know Kansas fans coming after me a little bit in the chat not long ago, saying that I was ignoring the TV numbers. I believe it was from the Illinois game when they got standalone on ESPN on a Friday. Was not trying to ignore those numbers, but it is standalone ESPN on a Friday. It's going to produce a big number. And that's kind of in the same way, looking at this, that Kansas, Texas, a game involving Texas at 2:30 on ABC on network television, that's going to do a big number. But legitimately, like, even with my fandom and where my loyalties lie, I mean, that's a game that I'm excited to watch. I don't know how you could be a Big 12 fan and look at that game and not be excited to watch it. Feels to me like Kansas is perhaps a little bit more well-rounded this year. Maybe the offense's ceiling hasn't been as high this year as what we saw last year, but their defense is actually starting to step up and make plays. So I don't know. I feel like that's going to be a pretty good game. I see Al Bundy doesn't think so. I think that's going to be a pretty good game. Let's see here. Who am I missing? Matthew. What's up, Matthew? We'll work Matthew in. Appreciate the support as always, Matthew. Matthew says BYU had some holes that became apparent against KU. Hoping they can right the ship and get a running game figured out. Luckily, home field against Cincinnati. Yeah, they do need to run the ball better. But to me, it just felt like, I mean, if you just don't give Kansas 14 points, if you just don't hand them 14 points on a silver platter with the huge hit, which, I mean, it was a hell of a play. So, I mean, give Jacoby Bryant all the credit in the world. That was an insane play, the hit that he had, and then running it back in for a touchdown. But especially like the pick. I mean, you can't do that. You can't do that. And if you don't do that, you may well win the game. I mean, that's clearly going down to the wire, and you're probably winning that game if you take both of them away. So it really was pretty simple to me. Like, if you're going to be on the road in the Big 12, you just can't be throwing away 14 points, giving it to the opposing team's defense. I don't see how that's a sustainable strategy in any way, shape, or form. But if you want to be a part of the show tonight, click the $ below the chat box. That's how you can attach a donation to your chat, make it a super chat, and be a part of it all tonight. I will not be able to see everything happening there with 300 people in the chat right now, so that is your way to make your voice heard and support the work that I'm doing here to bring you Big 12 content on a weekly basis on this channel. Please like the video as well if you could. I would much appreciate that. Likes, comments in the comment section of the video all help. And John-Kurtz-4, another way you can support the channel on Venmo. Houston at Texas Tech. Good old FS2. FS2, 2:30 on FS2. That is not going to do a big number. No statement on the teams there, but the fact that it's buried on FS2. Both of these teams need this really badly. I don't know. I mean, I feel like my inclination is to say Tech needs it worse because of what the expectation level was for Tech this year. But you're also talking about Houston being a team that's in its first year in the Big 12 with a coach that I think it's probably fair to say is on the hot seat. Certainly the temperature is not good right now for the fan base and how they feel about Houston. Already lost this year to one rival that he should have beat in Rice. This would be a way to earn a little bit of credibility back within the fan base if you can go on the road and win at Texas Tech. But I don't know that I'm seeing enough from Houston, certainly offensively right now, to feel great about the odds of that happening. But then for Tech, I mean, you're trying to figure out your quarterback situation. Baron Morton struggled to be really productive at West Virginia last week, albeit in a rainstorm. So can he turn that around? But the narrative around that game is very clear. Two teams, very disappointing starts to the season. Somebody's got to get a win, and somebody's got to start building themselves back up. And if you're Tech, I know it feels glum right now. It feels bad. But you do have Houston and Baylor. You can get yourself to 3-3, and then K-State's coming to town. So that'd be a home game. I assume it'd be a great atmosphere for that. Then you've got at BYU, TCU. Like, these are not impossible games coming up for Texas Tech if they can start to get themselves more confident, feeling better, and back to 500. So I'd say these next 2 weeks are almost like must-win sort of games for Texas Tech's season. FS1, Baylor at UCF. Boy, that game has lost a little bit of the luster that we thought it might have at the beginning of the year. Partially, I mean, UCF losing John Rice Plumlee, I think, has affected them. And then Baylor, I mean, yeah, losing their quarterback too, obviously has affected them. But that has just been a mess all the way around. UCF almost a 2-touchdown favorite in that game. I have a hard time seeing Baylor get it rolling there, but crazier things have happened. I would think the bounce house is going to be ready to go, though, for first Big 12 game. Oklahoma and Iowa State. Sooners 20-point home favorites. I guess the only thing I can say, if Rocco Becht has some more confidence now, and if Oklahoma's offense still is going to stay fairly average, I feel like the Sooners offense still is kind of mid, as the kids would say. I think the defense is a little better. But I think the offense is still yet to impress me against really legitimate competition this year. So, yeah, I would leave that out as a possibility, though I certainly would not predict it, that Iowa State could put a little bit of a scare into the Sooners. And then West Virginia at TCU. How about a pair of 3-1 teams? ESPN2 at 7. That's a sneaky, intriguing game. We just had that chat about West Virginia and where they're at. This would be a real, like, hey, go prove it sort of a deal for West Virginia. Couple of nice wins, but scuffling Texas Tech team and a Pitt team that ESP, I do not think they are very good at all. I do not think Pitt is very good at all. So you go win at TCU, who's been able to get back on track, pick themselves up off the mat after week 1 against Colorado. That would start to tell me something about what West Virginia actually is. Meanwhile, for TCU, another one of those schools that could really kind of get on a roll here. West Virginia at Iowa State, BYU are the next 3. Certainly those games are manageable, and then they're going to K-State. So you could be, I think the schedules for TCU and K-State both kind of set up to where that could be a matchup of, I think it would be 6-1 and 5-1, because K-State's already had the bye week, but that could turn into a matchup of 6-1 and 5-1 and be a sneaky, pretty good game after, seemingly everybody kind of wrote TCU off after week 1, losing to Coach Prime in Colorado. So a little bit of a rundown of what we got coming up in the Big 12 this week. Certainly open to any thoughts that you guys have on all of that. And I'll give you like a 5 to 10 minute warning here if you've got something that you want to get in on the show before it is that I bounce. Make sure you do it now. Click that $ below the chat box to attach a donation to your chat, make it a super chat, and ensure that you get in here with 300 plus people going in the chat right now. You knew that when this Michigan State job officially opened, there would be some Big 12 flavor to it. And that is definitely true. Early on, like before Mel Tucker was officially fired, which became official today, before he was officially fired, there had been some lists out there that included both Lance Leipold at Kansas and Chris Kleiman at K-State. Now you can remove Chris Kleiman from those lists. At least I guess it depends on how skeptical you actually are about coaches here, but I will give you my explanation. Chris Kleiman was asked on Big 12 radio on Sirius XM today about possible candidacy at Michigan State. And he said, quote, "I'll be sticking in Manhattan and will not be a candidate for that job." So about as plainly as you could deny it, but I know everybody points out like there's situations where that has happened. Hello, Nick Saban. Hello, Mel Tucker, who, I saw people throwing the screenshot out there. He had apparently tweeted, I forgot about this, I guess. Maybe I'm getting duped by the internet, but I saw screenshots going around of him saying that he wouldn't be a candidate at Michigan State, and then he wound up eventually taking that job. So, never say never. Never say never on that. But I would pretty much say never. I don't think that that's something that would interest Chris Kleiman. He went around on the tour around the state of Kansas with fans this summer saying he was going to retire in Manhattan. He's been pretty adamant about that. He's not a guy that wants to be out doing a bunch of media meet and greet sort of things. He just wants to sit back and coach ball, and he can do that at K-State, especially when the athletic director is Gene Taylor, who he's worked with back to the days when they were both at North Dakota State. Very comfortable with him. Don't foresee anything changing. The Iowa job opening up would give me a little bit of concern because he is an Iowa guy, but it feels like right now he's pretty content to ride things out in Manhattan. So I certainly take him at his word with with that. And I almost even, I get why they asked the question. I don't like really have a problem with it, but it was like he was kind of loosely brought up by maybe a person or two at first that had some legitimacy to it. And then you just had a burner Twitter account out there producing a fake story about him after the Missouri game, like meeting with Michigan State. And it's like, okay, are we asking him that because of what was just clearly a blatant troll attempt? But I digress. As far as candidates go, Brandon Marcello, national guy for 24/7 Sports, he put out this list where he said it comes from people in the industry, industry sources, early potential candidates to watch out for at Michigan State. Lance Leipold and Matt Campbell are two of the names, people. Lance Leipold and Matt Campbell, two of the names that come up there as names to watch at Michigan State. I laugh because, I mean, Matt Campbell, his agent is doing some really good work getting him on some of these lists still, man, and trying to keep his name out there as a hot coaching candidate because that star has really faded. That star has faded quite a bit in the last couple of years. And to be honest, the way like Brock Purdy and Breece Hall played in the NFL, I feel is almost more of an indictment on him. Like, how are you not winning more with these guys when they were here in 21? You went 7-6 with those dudes. Like, what? How is that happening? So I would not anticipate Matt Campbell being a real serious candidate there. But honestly, at this point, maybe if they're just doing it to further the meme and further the joke, the bit that we have going with that, maybe that's good enough for us and we shouldn't complain. Lance Leipold being on there, any Big Ten job is probably going to have him on the list. Any like non-Ohio State, Michigan Big Ten job, I would think you're going to see him get at least a little bit of run, a little bit of interest. I also have a hard time seeing him leaving for that. Michigan State is like, it is a good job. It certainly is historically a pretty good athletic department. But man, I mean, you're right in the shadow of Michigan where they've finally got it really up and running now with this high-profile head coach and Jim Harbaugh. Obviously, Ohio State is somebody that you have to deal with in the same league too. I mean, you're going to be behind Penn State in the pecking order, maybe like Wisconsin. There's just so much competition up there at the top of the Big Ten that's a job that's definitely in like tier 2 or tier 3. And the rival situation makes it difficult and what the fans are going to feel about that. I don't know. There are some real challenges there at Michigan State. Now, we know that they can throw around money because we saw them foolishly do it with Mel Tucker. And the expectation right now, I guess, would be that they're going to save that money, being able to fire him with cause. So they're going to have money. They're going to have money to throw around. But other names, if you're curious, Mike Elko, Jonathan Smith, Dave Clawson, Jason Candle, PJ Fleck, Charles Huff, Pat Narduzzi, Sean Lewis. Sean Lewis is really intriguing, offensive coordinator at Colorado, who's the Kent State head coach before that. And they have fallen off a cliff since he left. But I don't like PJ Fleck. That's another one. How is PJ Fleck still getting on lists like this right now? I feel like that's another one where it's got to be the agent doing some work. Like, I don't know. They lost to Northwestern last week, right? Like, you want PJ Fleck right now? And Pat Narduzzi, Pat Narduzzi. Not sure that there's a coach I would want less coaching my squad than Pat Narduzzi, just in terms of his attitude, demeanor, how boring that program is, and how mediocre they seem to be right now. But, just appealing to my West Virginia audience, I suppose, with the takedown of Pitt here. Oliver's calling a shot. Oliver says Houston 31, Tech 21, calling it now. Boy, Tech fans, here's your chance to get back in at Oliver for this one. And Houston Cougars Germany, listening to us all the way overseas, says, love it. Spelling it out, Luvit. Loving that idea of Houston over Tech. If Houston gets Tech 31-21 with Donovan Smith, while Tech is continuing to have quarterback issues, then that would certainly be something, right? So there are some juicy storylines there. There are some juicy storylines if it happens, but I don't know. I flash over to the regular chat, and the first thing I see is Jeff. Hey, Michigan State, I heard Les Miles is available. Yeah, I think Les Miles is available. We'll see. See if Michigan State chooses to go out there. All right, I think that's going to be about it. I will put together a little compilation of what we got today out of the college football playoff meetings and where that seems to be headed. and get that in a video packaged up all nicely for you guys this week, because I think it is valuable information. The Big 12 certainly has a vested interest in making sure that it's going to be at worst 5+7 model as we move forward. I mean, the next 2 years, I think it's very fair to say the worst case scenario is going 5+7, which the Big 12 would still be fine right there, and having virtual automatic access to the college football playoff with the 5 highest conference champions getting in. But the concern is going to be for the future. And so I'm keeping my eye on Mike Oresco and his negotiating tactics right now, and what that is going to do for the future of all of this, because you do not need this turning into 12 at-larges. That is where you would be. In some major trouble. So we'll keep going with that. Obviously, enjoy the games this weekend. Looking forward to that. K-State on a bye week, so I can kind of just kick my feet up and watch some games, see what unfolds this week in the Big 12. Like the video on your way out. I would much appreciate that. Leave a comment in the comment section, whether you agree, disagree, love me, hate me. All of that really helps. So I would appreciate it if you did that. What else do I need to tell you? John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo. If you want to support the channel that way, it would be much appreciated. And hey, tell your friends. Word of mouth, social media. Let them know if they're fans of your squad, fans of the conference. If they're conference realignment junkies, let them know that they would love this channel, and let's continue to grow this thing. Appreciate all of you guys that do. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday night. Take care. Have a great rest of your week. And I should talk to you again on Sunday. We'll see you.